Hello Internet, Taliesin here, and this is pretty awesome. As you know, one of the major new features of the next World of Warcraft expansion, The War Within, are hero talent trees that allow your spec to specialize further into one of two class fantasies with new abilities and enhancements. And this week, Blizzard are releasing a whole new bunch of them for feedback, including the Oracle talent tree, which Discipline and Holy will have the option to spec into. And obviously, as the world's #1 undisputed Discipline Priest, Blizzard asked me, and some guys from the Warcraftpriests Discord, to interview developers George Velev and Rodney Paré about the tree, get the lowdown, and get all the important answers that you need. Because obviously my opinion on Priest is very important to them, and the guys from the Warcraftpriests Discord. It was a really good talk. I think you'll find it very illuminating. Just before we hear it, let's take a quick look at that talent tree. And the main idea with Oracle, the central new mechanic, is the Premonition talent, which replaces Power Infusion, is on a 1-minute cooldown, and will either increase your target's healing received by 25% for 10 seconds, increase your target's magic damage dealt by 10% for 10 seconds, or increase your target's physical damage dealt by 10% for 10 seconds. You've probably got a lot of questions right now, and so do we, don't worry. The rest of the tree is then mostly improving and expanding on Premonition. So Perfect Vision reduces its cooldown by 10 seconds. You can choose between Divine Providence, which increases the duration of the effect by 2 seconds, or Fatebender, which increases Premonition's effect by 30% if the Divine spell is different from that of the previous Premonition cast. I know, we ask, I promise. Another important one is Versatile Divinations, that adds brilliance and urgency to the mix that can trigger on your Premonition target. Brilliance restores 5% of their mana, urgency increases their haste by 12% for 10 seconds. Grand Reveal awards an additional charge of Premonition when your Power Word Shield is absorbed or Prayer of Mending heals 150 times. And the big capstone talent is Clairvoyance, which is a low chance proc from Premonition to grant your target and 2 nearby allies all of the effects of your Premonition at 100% effectiveness. So as you can see, Premonition is going to be a central part of Oracle Priest gameplay and rotation. Some other nodes on this tree that we'll touch on include Preventative Measures, which increase the absorb of Power Word Shield and the healing of Prayer of Mending by 10%. Preemptive Care, which increases the duration of Atonement by 1 second and Renew by 3 seconds. And another one we'll be asking about in this interview is the choice node of Prompt Deliverance, reducing the cooldown of Purify by 2 seconds, or Divine Feathers, which grants you the effects of your Divine Feather whenever an ally walks through it. And don't forget, the way hero talents works is they're kind of like your dragon riding skill tree. You only have to choose between the 2 talents on those specific choice nodes. Every single talent on the tree is included as standard when you spec into Oracle. I'm sure you've got a lot of questions. So did we. I hope you enjoy the interview. Hello, everyone. Everyone in this call. It's amazing to be here amongst so many big brain Priest players and developers. We've been lucky enough to have a little look, sneak peek at the Oracle hero talent tree, and we have a lot of questions to ask you all about it. Before we do, can we get some introductions from everyone on the call?
Small Priest, I'm from Germany, I'm 23, and I've been playing WoW for maybe 6-7 years and been maining Discipline Priest for the majority of that. And I've been a member of the Priest Discord for most of the time. And yeah, just doing the day-to-day to help people out there, mostly in the Discipline channel.
And Clandon?
Yeah, I've been playing WoW for a very long time, but I've been playing Priest for about since early Legion, when it got reworked back then. I'm the owner of Warcraftpriests and very heavily involved in helping out a lot of newbie priests learn Discipline, mainly.
Hi, I'm Selda. I do a lot of WoW theory crafting in my free time, so people may know me from all sorts of places, not just the Priest section. I primarily do Shadow, but I do a lot of Discipline stuff as well.
So pretty Discipline Priest heavy here today. You'll be pleased to know. Let's say hello to the devs in this call as well.
My name is George Velev. I'm a producer on the World of Warcraft team, working mostly with the combat designers. Been playing WoW since Wrath, so happy to be here. Happy to chat about Oracle.
How you doing? I'm Rodney Paré. I'm a combat designer on the WoW team. I've been playing WoW since vanilla. I've played mainly Priest since BC, bit of Shaman. Yeah, happy to be here. Excited to talk about this.
Awesome. Now, like I say, we do have some very, very specific questions to be asking you during this talk, but I want to start with a much more kind of overall design philosophy question. I'd like you to complete this sentence, actually. When a disciplined priest or a holy priest decides to choose Oracle for their hero talent tree over one of the other ones that is available to them, how do you want them to feel when they're choosing that tree? You want them to choose that tree because they want to...
Sure, I can answer that. First, if someone is interested in the fantasy of the tree, then we're excited to fulfill the fantasy of receiving visions of the future and using those visions to take care of those around you. Mechanically, choose Oracle if you're excited about the new gameplay mechanic with Premonition, or you want to power up some of your more preemptive spells with Priest, like Powered Shield, Guardian Spirit, Pain Suppression, things like that. Yeah,
I think Rodney nailed it.
Brilliant. So you mentioned Premonition there, which is the major feature and mechanic of the Oracle class. Could you talk us through a little bit of your inspiration behind it as an idea, sort of where it comes from? Because it does seem to be pushing Priest into I don't want to say this word, but like a more kind of supportive sort of gameplay style for that hero talent tree.
Sure, yeah. So the way we approach all the hero talent tree designs is we sat down, we talked about, what's a really cool fantasy we can explore for these classes. For priests, we kind of landed, like Ronnie mentioned, on peering into the future, using that knowledge to protect your allies or, bolster them. And that felt like a really fun, unique spin on priests that we've been done before. So we pursued it. And now that we figured out what Oracle sort of was thematically, we were like, well, how can we deliver that? And we landed on Premonition. And it's certainly one of the more ambitious hero talent concepts, I think. We know it might get some immediate reactions, but we really feel sort of comfortable where it's at, and we want to see how it resonates with players. And ultimately, if it is feeling a little bit too divisive or too complicated, we plan on acting on that feedback and iterating how we deliver that fantasy. And just sort of set the record straight. Premonition is one variant that we're exploring for Oracle. We have other variants in mind, since we understand that Premonition can be a little bit too much for players. But this is a version that we're happy with right now. We want to share with players and get their feedback on. Sorry, I didn't answer your question fully.
Of course.
Regarding the sort of support space, we felt like offering a little bit of support flavor to healing spec by hero talent trees didn't feel super unheard of. I mean, you're still a healer fundamentally. It's just a little bit of seasoning on top of what you're already enjoying.
So my mind just goes back to BlizzCon and a number of interviews that we conducted and watched as well with devs in the wake of that when hero talents were announced. And a lot of people asked, would you be using hero talents as a way to kind of give other classes and specs a more supportive style? And we were told categorically no, that was not something that the devs were thinking about doing at all on every occasion. This does seem to be walking that back a little bit in terms of the scale of a discipline priest to an augmentation evoker. Where does Oracle kind of land on that scale, would you say, in terms of support?
I mean, it really shouldn't be going so far as to say that it's fully support spec. Hero talents fundamentally aren't going to change your role. You're still a disc priest. You're still a holy priest. You're just a little bit more of a support-oriented holy priest or disc priest. It should just be a little bit more flavor on top of what you're already enjoying. I mean, you're still a healer. Premonition also isn't your only button as an Oracle. You still have, the gamut of priest abilities at your kit. It's just there to sort of give that gameplay, or a little bit of that gameplay, to players who sort of want to be more support-oriented. I guess the question is sort of why priest? It's the only class that really has 2 healers. We want to try something a little bit new with hero talents, and we thought it was worth pursuing. Healers, like I mentioned, are already in sort of that supportive role, so adding a little bit more support into their kit felt worth exploring.
Cool. I'd like to look at the Premonition talent itself a little bit more, and I know that Small Priest has got some questions about that.
Yeah, exactly. So when we first got to read through them, we had a lot of ideas how it could actually work out when you're actually playing the spell. So it would be nice for you guys to just kind of straight up tell us, how does it actually work? Do you just cast it on an ally and you get a buff based on what kind of ally it is, DPS, melee DPS, range, tank, or is it just random, can't even cast it on someone before that, or is it a dex system? Just kind of to understand the mechanic first.
Sure, I can go over that. I have a feeling what you thought how it worked is may not be how it actually works. So
we've actually got a bet going on this, just so you know.
Do you? Okay, this is
some
great.
of us are going to be happy.
Okay.
Did we not gotten in on this bet? I mean, come on.
So we're aiming for an exciting combination of randomness and predictability. So when you cast a spell, every second the current available spell will change to the next one, and it's going to be in a set order, with the first one being random. So like, let's say you only have the initial talents, it'll go like Solace, Insight, Glory, Solace, Insight, Glory between those. And then if you ever press the button the second time, it'll cast whatever spell is currently available. So you can basically choose which buff you want for the situation.
Okay,
Who won the
I
bet?
did not bet on
I lost
that.
the bet, so
Yeah,
interview's
I did not
over.
bet
Don't
on
worry.
Okay, that's good to know. Then, so is it just the buff that you can see, or do you see it on the spell already? Like it just changes the icon to whatever you would get next? Okay.
Yeah, it changes the icon. Yep.
Okay.
So it is
So
very
just to
much like
clarify-
the seasons talent for Paladin in Shadowlands, in that sense.
Yeah, it has a similar theme going on there. This is rotating every second once you press it, so it's a bit quicker than.
Oh,
than
okay,
Oh my
than
gosh!
that,
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
Okay.
I'm not sure in the cadence just yet. We still need to test that a lot, but every second it'll swap between the spells right now.
So you cast the spell once, and then once you cast the spell, it cycles until you cast it again. Is there a duration on that, or does it continue to cycle until you choose which spell you're getting?
There's a duration. I think currently we're aiming for about 12 seconds of it going through the cycle.
Okay.
Enough to get a couple cycles worth so that you don't miss the one you wanted.
Does the cooldown start when you first press it, or when you actually pick a spell and then cast it on an ally?
Currently it starts right when you press it, and then while it's like, we don't want to put pressure on you to cast it as soon as possible. So yeah, it'll start as soon as you press the button.
That makes sense. Then another thing I'm gonna assume is probably the case. Is it also off GCD like Power Infusion?
Yep,
That is
it's off
correct.
GCD.
Okay, that makes sense. Is it castable on yourself, all of the buffs, or is it only on an ally?
It is castable on anyone, including yourself, and it does work with Twins of the Sun Priestess. Yeah.
So it would grant you the same buff that you grant an ally.
Not exactly. So if you cast Glory on an ally, what I want to do is have it cast a more valuable one on you, because that's a melee focused buff. So it'll cast Insight likely on you, but we're still figuring out some of those nuances. But we didn't want it to be best to just cast the Insight one to get the magic buff every time.
I mean, it shouldn't be too hard to find out which one's best for the priest, since it's only, well, there's only Holy and this that can get it. Much more limited on who can get the buffs then.
Right.
Okay, and then is there any plans to, well, with how Clairvoyance works, is there any way to protect the players from having to like fish pre-pull to get a special proc?
As far as Clairvoyance goes, we don't have any initial plans to prevent any pre-pull stuff. People are going to want to cast it before the pull as just like a normal behavior, so we don't want to prevent that. If it does become something like a common behavior or something that you guys feel like, hey, it's too powerful, we need it before the pull, then it's something we can bring back to the team to discuss.
Okay.
I would say likewise with the cycle of abilities kind of going through. Do those go through when you're not in combat as well? Because there's going to be fishing for those before a pull too.
Yeah, and I'm more okay with the fishing before the pull. Choose the one you want to get, but definitely accepting feedback on the cadence as well. Like if you feel like, hey, I don't have any time to do the mechanic, that'd be good to know as well, because it's currently at about a second. So interested if what you guys think about that.
I think that's just gonna have to see how it feels mid combat when you're paying attention to other stuff as well.
Yeah, some big weak auras. And on the subject of Clairvoyance, it being a low chance when you're casting Premonition, we feel like in Raid that's going to probably turn out to be, only a handful of times that it kind of procs per encounter. And I know that there was a lot of worry when we were talking about it that, in some scenarios, a priest might get one Clairvoyance in a boss fight or sometimes kind of multiple. Are you okay with only proccing once per boss fight, or...
So we're not tied to a specific cooldown right now. We want it to feel great when it does proc, but like you mentioned, we know that it's tricky to land that perfectly. The design of Clairvoyance is something that we're happy with, and we feel it's pretty compelling and worth exploring. But if it doesn't feel great, or if it feels sort of too impactful, or if you feel like you need Clairvoyance at this time to really kill a boss, that's really good feedback to hear and feedback that we'll take back and discuss. Ultimately, it really shouldn't be such a big part of your Oracle kit. It's just one of many talents. Premonition really should be sort of the focus, not Clairvoyance.
Would you expect there to be big swings in the priest's kind of throughput or sort of numbers from pool to pool with Clairvoyance procs, or?
That's something that we're exploring. I don't know if we could say if we expect big swings either way, but if the feedback that we're getting is Clairvoyance is going to lead to big swings, that's really good to know. And it's kind of sounding like that may be the case. So
cool. Thank you. And like on the subject of kind of throughput and sort of priest numbers, I know Clandon has got some questions on that.
Yeah, which a lot of the original questions on this were off of a different assumption. So I think a lot of these questions are in regards to personal throughput gain with Premonition are not really as relevant now that we know that you kind of have a little bit of control in regards to cycling through that deck and picking the one you want. Especially knowing, one of my big questions here was going to be glory providing no personal value for a priest if you get it through Twins of the Sun Priestess. So if you guys have a system in place for smartly giving the priest a different buff when they cast glory on an ally, then that kind of covers that issue. For something like Insight, having a fairly big difference in regards to it being a personal buff built into the kit, I would assume the intent is to have Insight's magic damage dealt increase, work, and increase Discipline's atonement healing.
Yeah, that would be the case.
So that would be a fairly big difference in throughput, where if a disc gets Insight, they're getting a pretty significant throughput increase, whereas if Holy gets Insight, they're just getting a DPS increase.
Yeah, I think that's a good point and good feedback for us to take back to the team and discuss a bit more. And like maybe magic damage increase or physical damage increase isn't the best target for some of these buffs, but the general concept of the buffs is something that we're very excited about with this. But if you feel like those particular aspects of it aren't working out, that's good to know.
Okay. Yeah, so the other thing would be something like pulling the 5% mana as opposed to pulling an actual DPS or HPS increase, where you kind of seeing that play out, where situations where somebody would actively be choosing to provide them and another healer 5% mana as opposed to giving a DPS 10% throughput and themselves 10% throughput as well.
I mean, I could think of a lot of scenarios where me playing Ressa Shaman, I'm and I want an extra, 5% mana to cast a Healing Tide, and that, opportunity arises. It's really up to what players feel is appropriate. I understand that throughput's really important to folks, but having a clutch mana regen, when the boss is at 2% and you really need a Spirit Link to keep people alive, those are cool moments that we also want to support. So,
absolutely. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. And then my only other question in regards to this would be, with the increase in focus of like combat hooks for augmentation evoker and stuff like that, I know with PI it's a lot harder with how haste interacts with a lot of classes, but for some of these more straightforward damage increases, has there been any talk in regards to including combat hooks for things like Solace or Insight or Glory?
It depends on the final design, but adding combat hooks for any spell mechanics similar to the augmentation evoker spells is something we would like to do. Right now, our priority is making sure the ability is functioning and fun.
Right, yeah, I want to go to Sailder, who's got some questions about the burden of knowledge.
Right, so as a player that played Priest a lot, you get a lot of questions from players that are just asking, who do I cast Power Infusion on? Like, who is the best target for Power Infusion in your raid? And there's a lot of resources out there that, tell people who to cast Power Infusion on. And it's a lot simpler just because you always have Power Infusion. Because this ability cycles through and you have different buffs, is there any concern about like the burden of knowledge on the player to having to know extra information about who this is good for, especially with relation to the fact that one of the buffs is physical damage and one of the buffs is magical damage? This isn't always obvious who the best target for those buffs would be, because, for example, Retribution Paladin does mainly magic damage, despite being a melee DPS.
Yeah, it's a great question. First of all, thank you for being resourcer players who have these kind of questions. We really appreciate stuff like that on the dev side. But yeah, increasing the knowledge requirements for how players utilize spells is definitely top of mind for us for any design, not just Oracle. How can we make fun and compelling talents and tweaks without making it too complicated or too overpowering or too much of a burden for players is sort of a fun design challenge that we sort of tackle every day. In the case of Oracle, Premonition definitely has more headspace requirements and power infusion. But it's a direction that we want to explore and see what people think on. And we're happy to tweak parts of it that don't land well. I mentioned previously we're exploring like a few other variants for Premonition. There's a variant where instead of giving school damage, it gives primary stat, strength, agi, int, which is one variant that we could sort of pivot towards if people aren't really vibing with the spell school current variant.
I think that variant sounds like it possibly would be a lot better, especially for the distinction between Holy and Discipline, because the primary stat would also work better for Holy than the Insight working for Disc. So we'll see where it goes, and both ideas seem good.
Sweet,
Yeah.
happy to hear that.
That leads us quite nicely into the differences between Holy and Disc in how this tree kind of affects them and how they play. And that sounds like a good opportunity for Small Priests to talk about the left side of the tree.
Yep. Exactly. So let's move just for a moment, move away from just Premonition. On the left hand of the tree, we have a bit of power boost into Power Shield and Prayer of Mending through preventive measures, assured safety, and Grand Reveal. The question we have for that side of the tree is it supposed to push or encourage Disc Priests to start using Prayer of Mending in their actual rotation and Holy Priests to start using Power Shield, or is it just to give a little bit of extra healing but with a bit of flavor, because it's nicer to cast Power Shield and get Prayer of Mending than just to have Power Shield be 5% stronger, even if they end up being the same healing.
What a great time to have a bunch of Discipline Priests in front of me to answer this. But we're considering Prayer of Mending being used in the rotation within this tree only, not as a primary spec thing. So I'd be interested in thoughts on that. For Holy, not so much. We're not intending for Powered Shield to be a part of the rotation suddenly. It's just meant to be a bonus to help trigger the Grand Reveal effect, as well as just some extra absorb. So any thoughts on Prayer Bending, Discipline, rotation?
Well, in general, I think since with the small rework that this got in 10.2, we had a little. Well, the good part of it was for sure that we went a bit down on the button bloat and reduced the complexity of it a bit. And I'm a little bit worried that maybe adding Prayer of Mending also into the rotation might make it even more complicated again, especially if maybe you can answer if you've considered the Powered Shield casting Prayer of Mending, applying Powered Shield. Does that also then apply Atonement to the target that you cast it on?
Good question. Currently, it would not. It's something we're open to discussing. Mainly wanted to gauge feedback on using it in the rotation, and then we can sort of shore up any of the gripes with Atonement specifically.
Okay. I mean, as a general thing, if it's powerful enough, Discipline has plenty of downtime where it can just throw out filler spells as well. If they're worth the mana and do enough healing, Prayer of Mending is pretty efficient itself, so it does have room for that. If it does start applying Atonement, I would almost say it goes into a negative direction, because you're going to be starting rotations for Atonement ramps that are like Power Shield, Prayer of Mending, Renew, Power Shield, Renew, Flash Heal, Prayer of Mending, Power Shield, and it just gets very convoluted. For basically very simple process, you just want to apply Atonements to people.
Yeah, it's a good thought. Definitely we'll take that back to the team. I'm curious how you feel about a choice here of opting into Prayer Bending gameplay or not, or are you suggesting maybe stay away from it in general?
I think depending on how filler intensive Disc already is, at the moment, Disc is very focused on getting CDR from casting Smites to get their pet cooldowns low. But if it wasn't too focused on that, or if the fight allows for some freedom, you do have a lot of globals that you could just throw out a Prayer of Mending in preparation for the upcoming event. And if it does have enough interaction with the kit that aren't necessarily bound to Atonement, it would also be fine.
Okay, thank you.
And as last question to that, Grand Reveal, since it applies a stack, or it grants you a stack for each time Prayer of Mending heals, which baseline is 5 stacks, and Powered Shield when it gets consumed. This also means if you're not actually casting Prayer of Mending actively, you basically get no stacks for this. Casting Powered Shield and applying 1 Prayer of Mending stack is just 2 stacks, and we do not cast Powered Shield enough to even get 150 stacks throughout one fight, basically. So given that you said you want us to cast Prayer of Mending with this, it does make sense. Without it, the stack count is just too high.
Yeah, that's a good point. We have tools to adjust per spec here, so if we need to, we'll use that.
Okay, that's good to know.
I know that was like one of the things that leapt out at everyone straight away on that was how much more Holy looked like they were going to get out of it.
Yeah.
I really, really don't want to miss this Divine Feather question, Clandon.
Yeah. So I'm very curious how you guys see Divine Feathers playing out in combat. Generally, Priest is one of the least mobile classes in the game. We're kind of the ones that in general need the most help with our mobility. There's been fights recently where I'm spending a lot of time getting carried around by my evokers. So as the player that needs the most help, I would love to help other people with these feathers, but with the targeting for Divine Feathers, are you concerned about the kind of mini game of trying to click feathers directly on a player and oops, they sidestepped it and now I don't get my own personal mobility that I really need?
That's definitely a good point with this for feedback. Our intent was, honestly, we always find it fun to try to like put feathers in front of people and help them get speed bonuses, but often, as you're saying, you have to use them on yourself for your own mobility. So we're trying to increase a bit more and give them a bit more interaction between you and other players here. And it's a good point that they could be moving around or you could miss and you might not get it. So that's feedback we'll take back to the team. But the intent was to be a little more altruistic with your feathers and gain a little benefit out of using on others instead of always using on yourself.
Okay. Yeah, something we tend to when new players come in and ask about how to use Angelic Feather, something we often send them to is using an @player modifier on their feather to just drop it right at your feet. We often tell them, it would be very nice if you also had like a shift modifier or some sort of modifier to be able to place it for other people. But a lot of people just tend to use the @player modifier and just use it as their own personal mobility. Is there any potential opportunity to open up additional targeting options for Angelic Feather to maybe be able to do an mouse over, to be able to mouse over give it to people and have it apply the movement speed directly instead of trying to drop it directly in front of them?
Wish I could say otherwise, but we don't have any plans to update any mouse over macro targeting currently.
Okay.
I'll say it. I hate that talent. Sorry, it's horrible. It's brilliant. I love the idea behind it. I as soon as I saw it, I was just like, okay, no. What's the void tree? No, I'm joking. I love the idea behind it. Get me casting feathers at people. Right, okay, we got to go. But I just want to touch on one last thing before we do. You mentioned class fantasy on the way out there. We've heard about some of these trees getting some special visual effects for various spells and stuff. Anything in mind for Oracle for that?
Yeah, great question. That's something we're currently discussing with our FX partners. We're happy with Oracle, we're happy with Premonition and Clairvoyance. We want to make sure that these are like super obvious to players when they're active and when they're applied. So yeah, I'm really excited to see what Oracle turns into, but it's definitely gonna have solid VFX attached to it. So it's super obvious because, like Ronnie mentioned, it rotates quickly, and clarity should be really sort of key here.
That's awesome. I think the whole visual class fantasy is something that a lot of the community is really excited about with hero talents, and it would be a shame if that kind of got left by the wayside, I think. But anyway, that's just a personal thing, really. Guys, it's been an honor and a joy listening to you talk about this and your thoughts and ideas. And thank you for letting us take a look at the tree. Thank you for letting us talk you through it. And we'll say goodbye. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity.
All right, it was awesome to meet you all in chat. Thanks.
Yeah,
thank you.
Have a great day.
There we have it, guys. Oracle! What's most clear from that interview, I think, is how open the team appear to be to tweaking, changing, or flat out replacing any of the talents on it, including Premonition itself, which is incredibly heartening to hear, and why your feedback is important. So if you have any thoughts and opinions on this tree, and I'm sure you do, please make them known on the Blizzard blog post, which is linked in the description of this video, because they are listening. They say they're listening. Hey, and while you're there, you should probably click on that other link to the Warcraftpriests Discord channel and join that too. It has been an indispensable resource for me over the years. It's a really cool community, and as you just saw, there are some incredibly insightful and clever people on there. Massive thanks to Clandon, Small Priest, and Saildur from that Discord for making this such a good interview. Of course, George and Rodney for giving their time, and Blizzard for the opportunity to talk to them. I hope you found it as interesting as we did, and we look forward to discussing all of these hero talent trees more as things develop, and when they actually become playable in the War Within Alpha for some proper testing. Thank you for joining us today. From me, Taliesin, and the rest of the A-tier top-level priest player community, until next time, cheerio.